Ireland could also see a mixture of sleet and snow, and a much colder feel as well, especially when you add on the strength of the wind. Still, that wind's blowing through Friday afternoon, but easing down during Friday night, and things could then again turn icy as we keep some showers coming into the northwest. A wintry mix of showers, a chilly start to what will be a windy weekend. Wet in the north on Saturday, dry in the south. Showers for all of us on Sunday.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the issues that we should be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and nobody will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is the wonderful journalist Dawn Neeson, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. Energy costs are soaring, meaning millions face bigger bills, yet a UK energy giant has paid shareholders billions of pounds in dividends. Plus, what's going on in Northern Ireland? The country's Brexit deal is in total confusion and the First Minister is threatening to resign. And there's growing pressure on London's top cop after the Home Secretary blamed her for failures in leadership. That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but what do you need to get off your chest? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. But first, it's time for the headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 2. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The cost of living is set to soar for millions of households across the UK, with energy regulator Ofgem announcing a 54% rise in the price cap. Those on default tariffs paying by direct debit will see their bills go up by nearly £700, and prepayment customers face annual charges of more than £2,000. The change will be introduced from April the 1st, affecting around 22 million customers. Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he'll give households in council tax bands A to D an extra £350 to ease the burden.
It is not sustainable to keep holding the price of energy artificially low. For me to stand here and pretend we don't have to adjust to paying higher prices would be wrong and dishonest. But what we can do is take the sting out of a significant price shock for millions of families by making sure the increase in prices is smaller initially and spread over a longer period.
Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accused the government of forcing households to load up their credit cards.
But what did the government offer? A buy now, pay later scheme that loads up costs for tomorrow. High prices as far as the eye can see. This year, next year and the year after that. Give with one hand now and take it all back later. The party opposite used to talk about the nation's credit card. Well, today, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the Chancellor force British households to load up their credit cards.
Energy giant Shell has managed to capitalise on the soaring gas and oil prices. The company recorded a pre-tax profit of £12 billion in the last 3 months of 2021, up from almost £900 million in the previous quarter. Shell now plans to return £6.3 billion to investors by buying back their shares. People are also facing higher mortgages following a rise in interest rates. The Bank of England's trying to curb inflation, which is set to hit 7.25%, that's according to forecasts. The Monetary Policy Committee voted to raise rates to 0.5% and signalled more hikes are on the way. It marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase since June 2004. GB News understands Northern Ireland's First Minister, Paul Givan, is planning to resign today. It comes amid increasing tensions over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Officials have been ordered to stop agri-food checks, which the EU says is a breach of international law. Boris Johnson says a sensible approach is needed.
What we've got to do is get to a sensible solution that recognises that it's crazy to have checks on goods that are basically circulating within the single market of the United Kingdom. Now, we can do that, but without having a full panoply of checks on the GBNI coast and at the airport. And that's the way forward. I think practical common sense is what's needed.
Meanwhile, hauliers are calling for clarity following the order to stop Brexit checks. Northern Ireland Policy Manager for Logistics UK, Seamus Lenny, says the sector has no idea what's going on.
There was a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety with businesses. They weren't too sure what they had to do. Did they still have to fulfil the administration with regards to moving products of plant and animal origin in here? Generally, the advice this morning from government departments is that you must still complete the paperwork to move goods in here. I'm not really too sure what's happening at the border control posts. We've not been told what's happening yet and what staff is actually doing anything.
US Special Forces say they've killed the leader of ISIS in a raid in northwest Syria. President Joe Biden announced that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi has been removed from the battlefield and there were no US casualties. Al-Qurashi reportedly detonated a bomb, killing himself and at least 13 other people, including women and children. Scottish Championship club Raith Rovers have apologised and announced they'll look to cancel Davy Goodwilly's contract. They said in a statement that they'd focused far too much on football matters and not enough on morals. The striker was found to have raped a woman by a civil court in 2017 and ordered to pay damages, but he's never faced criminal charges. Russia has criticised US plans to send more troops to Eastern Europe, describing the move as destructive. President Joe Biden has ordered nearly 3,000 military personnel to Poland and Romania to bolster NATO defences. Moscow has denied plans to invade Ukraine, but it's understood Russia's now mobilised 115,000 troops on its border. Former UK Ambassador Sir Mark Lyle Grant told GB News that the troop deployment is a symbolic measure. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Alex and We Need to Talk About.
Heating or eating? It should not be this way in the 5th largest economy in the world. A country that spends £11 billion a year on foreign aid when its own citizens can't keep warm and feed themselves. Oh, it's easy to blame Putin, but it's our energy policies over the past decades that have played right into his hands. David Cameron made you pay wealthy landowners like his own father-in-law to have wind turbines. Then the wind didn't blow. Theresa May said she would frack in 2015, but it didn't happen. By now, perhaps we could be selling our gas, adding to the national coffers and spiking Putin's plans. Then the abject failure to invest in nuclear, allowing Chinese state-backed companies in on critical national infrastructure before dramatically having to pull the plug, leaving many proposed sites hanging in the balance. And if you think things are bad now, wait for the extreme targets we signed up to at COP as Boris showboated about going further than any other developed nation in cutting carbon. And now Shell, the UK energy giant who has just relocated their headquarters to London, has boasted the highest quarterly profits in 8 years, rewarding shareholders with £6 billion windfall it amassed as a result of being the largest trader in liquefied natural gas. It's enough to make your blood boil, even if you can't afford to put your kettle on. Well, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, addressed the House of Commons about this earlier today. He announced a number of measures he said would take the sting out of the shock for the millions who face rising costs.
We are delivering that support in 3 different ways. First, we will spread the worst of the extra costs of this year's energy price shock over time. This year, all domestic electricity customers will receive an upfront discount on their bills worth £200. Energy suppliers will apply the discount on people's bills from October, with the government meeting the cost in full. That discount will automatically be repaid from people's bills in equal £40 instalments over the next 5 years. This is the right way to support people while staying on track with our plans to repair the public finances. And because we are taking a fiscally responsible approach, we can also provide more help faster to those who need it most, the second part of our plan. We're going to give people a £150 council tax rebate to help with the cost of energy in April, and this discount won't need to be repaid. And I do want to be clear with the House that we are deliberately not just giving support to people on benefits. Lots of people on middle incomes are struggling right now too. So we have decided to provide the council tax rebate to households in bands A to D. This means around 80% of all homes in England will benefit. And the third part of our plan will provide local authorities with a discretionary fund of nearly £150 million to help those lower income households who happen to live in higher council tax properties and households in bands A to D who are exempt from council tax at all.
Well, let's talk to former Chief Executive of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I mean, it must stick in a lot of people's craw that Shell have announced record-breaking profits in the first quarter, while taxpayers are essentially picking up the tab for a litany of myopic energy policy making by the government. Labour have proposed a windfall tax on big oil and gas companies' windfall profits. Do you think that's reasonable?
Well, I'm not in favour of windfall taxes at all, because I always think that they result in the wrong thing happening. It might be a short-term, political good gesture, but long-term, it's not going to cause any benefits other than they'll either move out of the sector, they won't do the drilling that's required, and so on. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm defending Shell. I'm not. I do think that they haven't thought this through properly, and they're actually going to cause, by the announcement they've made today, they're going to cause a lot of upset. They're not in fact, a big supplier, of course, to households in the UK. This is, I think you said in your opener, is money that they're making out of their drilling operations and out of their trading operations. And there will be a chunk of that they'll pay in corporation tax, to the public coffers, and also, as far as their shareholders are concerned, they're big shareholders of pension funds. So, you know, the money's just not being wasted. But I do agree with you that thinking this through is something that Shell, I don't think, has done very well at all. I wonder if I could make a couple of other points about Shell.
I was going to say, do you think as well that thinking this through is something that successive governments have failed to do? I mean, surely we could have seen down the line that we'd have a looming energy crisis. I noticed it back in 2015 where I thought it would be a good idea to start fracking. So at least we've got something to transition, to use as a transition as we go about cutting carbon emissions. And yet successive governments have just put together piecemeal energy policies that have left us in a pickle.
Yes, I mean, that is where I entirely agree with you, actually, that energy policy over the last decade plus has focused, firstly, on building green energy, which in effect is predominantly wind in this country, and closing down coal-fired power stations. And they haven't thought about the transition at all. Now, yes, there is a lot of objections against fracking, but at the same time, what we haven't done is develop properly our own repeatable nuclear reactors. That is underway right now. Rolls-Royce is one of the leaders in this game. And of course, those small-scale repeatable nuclear reactors can be built much more rapidly than the great big ones, of which, you know, both France and, of course, to a certain extent, China have been involved. And so what I would say is that today we are in a particular situation, and the Chancellor's made the announcements, which I sincerely hope will predominantly assist both two things, the poorer households, but also in what has to be a smooth transition in costs, not just for us as individuals, as householders, but also, of course, for industry as well, because these costs hit industry. Industry are big employers. So this is a short term. This is this year and next year. They'll need to think further than that, but at the same time, we must get our energy policy in place. And I do agree that is a mixture of fracking. It's also deciding how we deal with these additional green costs. If we are building more offshore wind farms, we've got to build the backup because the wind does not blow all the time. We do have long-term North Sea gas contracts. We do have long-term contracts also with Norway. It's the wholesale price right now that is being affected by predominantly Russia, but other actions as well. And that's why a bit more drilling by our own people in the North Sea will help, because we've got to get over the next, 7-8 years as we build the backup nuclear in a way which is a reasonable price, not just for us as individuals and householders, but also for the economy of the country. So think through the energy policy, be practical, be sensible, get this right has got to be the clear message of today, as well as look after the poor ends of society.
Angela, I would make you Minister for Energy tomorrow if I could. Very sanguine advice there. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. That's Angela Knight, who's a former Chief Executive of Energy UK. Well, joining me in the studio today is the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Dawn, this is just failure in government policy, kowtowing to greenies. It's going to get worse, isn't it? We signed up to COP now. Boris is there showboating on the world stage about going harder and faster and further than anybody else. And look where we are right now.
We are signed up to this ridiculous target of being carbon neutral, net zero by 2035. 2022 now, that is
years.
not. But he can't go back in any of that. You know, when he managed to stay awake at COP, as you say, was showboating so much, you know, look how green I am, and you wonder whether that's coming from home, or he genuinely believes it or not. But we're the ones paying the cost, Alex. I mean, you know what annoyed me this morning with Rishi's announcement was, you know, giving the council tax rebate back, right? OK, that is going to cost the government round about £9 billion. The green levies on our tax bills at the moment, actually, on our energy bills at the moment, is also £9 billion. So we are giving the government money to give back to us. It makes no sense whatsoever. Some energy bills, depending on what tariff you're on and whether you've got dual fuel or single fuel, 25% of that bill is a green levy. Now, even if you just froze it for a couple of years, Alex, That has to make more sense than this ridiculous fiddling around with the council tax, which isn't going to help a lot of families in any case. And what does it work out to? It's like, you know, it's like pennies every week when your gas bill, the average gas bill, is going to go up £2,000 a year. I mean, well, it's going to be up to £2,000 a year. Sorry, £639 a year. It's going to go on that.
And you'd imagine as well, the bigger gas bills are going to be bigger family homes with children, and they're probably not going to be in bands A to D, are they?
But this is the other issue. You've got a lot of people, especially in the south, are in the higher rate council tax bills for big houses, but they're not rich. They're not rich in any way, shape or form. They just happen to have big houses, often been in the family for years. They're going to be hit on every level. And it's not just the energy bills. We've got mortgages, national insurance, grocery, council tax, fuel bills.
All of it going up.
Everything is going up. Ordinary families are really feeling the pinch here. And the government are just fiddling around and ignoring what ordinary people want. 25% off in green levies is just wrong. And the VAT. Now, Boris, he actually boasted that once we did Brexit, he could cut VAT on whatever he wanted, certainly on fuel bills. He boasted about it. Why isn't he doing it? Another 5% we could save.
Yeah, no, we do need some firm policy making, don't we? Well, listen, I want to know what you think about this. Have you had a mild coronary since opening the latest projection of what your gas bill might come? Are you actually sitting there thinking, I've got to now start turning the thermostat down and put on more woolly jumpers, or I can't afford to put the gas hob on, otherwise I won't be able to clothe and shod my kids? I want to know. So do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And, of course, you can tweet us at GB News. I want to hear your personal stories on this one. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. It's time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast. I'm back in a bit.
Hello again. A mild one again today, but things are changing. Tomorrow's going to be an awful lot colder, and that colder weather will arrive after a wet and windy spell tonight. It's all coming from a cold front, which is approaching at the moment and will later today bring some heavy rain to the Western Isles and the Highlands of Scotland. But for most of us, it's another dry day. There's a lot of cloud around, but we are seeing some breaks in the clouds, so a bit of sunshine likely, parts of East Wales, the Midlands, North East England, Eastern Scotland seeing some breaks in the cloud, and even further south we may at times see a little blue sky. But generally cloudy, dry and mild with a bit of a breeze blowing. Temperatures double digits, maybe 12, 13 degrees where we see some sunshine. But there's that rain coming into the far northwest later on. Could be quite heavy for a time, and it will start to turn to snow initially over the mountains. It pushes southwards, that rain band across into northern England, parts of Wales overnight. So an hour or two of rain, and for a short spell at least, that rain could be pretty heavy again, falling as snow over the Welsh mountains. Staying quite mild in the far southeast, but elsewhere it is going to turn colder, so it could turn icy as that band of wet weather moves through. And there is the possibility early tomorrow morning of a bit of snow over the Midlands, East Anglia, possibly parts of southern England, just for a time, not expected to last too long before that sweeps away. And then we've got sunny spells and showers. Those showers will be turning more and more wintry, initially over hills, but down to low levels from mid-morning onwards over northern England. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland could also see a mixture of sleet and snow, and a much colder feel as well, especially when you add on the strength of the wind. Still that wind blowing through Friday afternoon, but easing down during Friday night, and things could then again turn icy as we keep some showers coming into the northwest, a wintry mix of showers, a chilly start to what will be a windy weekend, wet in the north on Saturday, dry in the south, showers for all of us on Sunday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
There will be no border down the Irish Sea. Oh yes, that's what he said in one of many half-truths sold to the nation in typical blasé Boris bluster. Well, guess what? There is, and it's caused one heck of a headache. Yet again, after having zero government for 3 years, the power-sharing executive in Stormont has collapsed. Make no mistake, the EU knew what they were doing, warmongering over the Irish border, and they got their own way. They annexed Ulster, taking Belfast as their scalp for Brexit, assuming it would be an unconscionable price to pay. Today, with the DUP deciding to simply stop checks on goods between the UK and, well, the UK, and then collapsing the government in protest, it has led to yet another catastrophic breakdown in power, while the EU bleats about breaking international law. How will we ever resolve the dog's dinner left as a result of Boris's oven-ready deal? With Lord Frost gone, who is now the custodian of our territorial integrity and our hard-won sovereignty? And how will Northern Ireland continue to function with nobody behind the wheel? Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, joins us from Stormont. Dougie, what is the latest there? We're hearing of potential resignations down the line.
Well, actually, I'm not in Stormont. I'm in a hotel in South Belfast. This conference room will become pretty historical because in the next 2 hours, the First Minister will go to these microphones behind me and he will resign, effectively bringing the Northern Ireland government down. This is exactly what Sinn Féin did when 2016 the Brexit vote came in. They brought down the Northern Ireland government over the head of what they claimed was the renewable heat incentive, but it was quite clear they didn't want to be part of Brexit in any one way. They seen it would divide Ireland and put a border down it. Boris Johnson then decided that he would try and push Theresa May out of the road, and that he claimed he had an oven-ready deal. Now, the deal that was here in Northern Ireland is a very, very tricky deal. It brought to an end decades of violence in Northern Ireland when it agreed in the Good Friday Agreement that consent, the basis of any agreement here, would be put in place. And the Good Friday Agreement was won in 1998. Fast forward to 2016 to Brexit, and go a couple of years later when Boris brought his oven-ready deal and he agreed that consent could be overlooked, that Northern Ireland would be held inside the laws of the EU, and that the European Courts of Justice, the ECJ, would be the person that judged how divergence between EU and UK law would be brought to bear. Now, that apparently was to respect the Good Friday Agreement and stop a border going in Ireland. The then Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, went to Brussels with pictures of a border post blowing up and claimed this would happen if borders went into Ireland. So the Unionists now do not like the borders in the Irish Sea because 70% of the trade in Northern Ireland is with the UK and vice versa. We are held without lots of subsidies in our farming, and we are held to laws that we have no control over. Dublin has MEPs, Northern Ireland doesn't. Sinn Féin and the SDLP, both nationalist parties, have access to those MEPs, so therefore they have access to laws, leaving Unionists in nothing more than a colony. They have warned Boris Johnson that they will bring this down continually. They have asked for Article 16 to be triggered. It hasn't been. Lord Frost didn't like the way it was going, and we've got to this point now where Liz Truss arrived here a week ago. I don't think the DUP liked what she was saying. There is some speculation that the DUP sort of spiked this to help Boris, but this was Boris's mess. This is no help to him, and it is now a complete mess, Northern Ireland with no government.
Yeah, Dougie, honestly, it's a complex situation, massive headlines as well, and you've done a brilliant job in trying to piece it all together and explain it. It's extremely hard to keep up. Dougie Beattie, who's our Northern Ireland correspondent. Well, it is a bit of a pickle, isn't it? So let's talk to Mick Fealty, who's the editor of Slugger O'Toole, which is a news and opinion portal. Mick, what does it mean if the First Minister does resign? What's the rationale behind it, and what can we expect to happen?
Look, the rationale, I think this hasn't been done rashly. You know, Dougie mentioned the collapse of Stormont for 3 whole years over the head of something called the Renewable Heating Incentive. But as he says, that was really an excuse by Sinn Féin to get out of what was a very unpopular administration trying to mediate between Brexit and sort of Irish interests on that particular scale. This is a much more tactically, I wouldn't call it strategic. There's no strategy around any of this stuff. This is all very, very reactive. But it's part of a series of actions that have taken place over the last few weeks. So first of all, the Agriculture Minister, Edwin Poots, tries to table the paper on the power sharing executive table, basically proposing how to deal with the fact that the protocol isn't working, that there's very little visible progress in the various committees around all of this. So he tables a paper which suggests they pull all the checks that are currently being placed on the Irish Sea. Sinn Féin, who share the top office, the executive office, blocked that, and therefore he said, well, if you're not going to let me bring it in front of the executive, because it's a controversial issue and I need your assurance, I'm going to take action myself. So he has unilaterally pulled all the checks off the Irish Sea. Now, it seems to me this is stage 2, pulling the First Minister out, which ought to really collapse the executive and, you know, sort of mean an end to business at Stormont. And that, to me, is the second stage in all of this stuff. Really, what they're trying to do is to put pressure, initially perhaps on London, although London seems to be playing ball with the DUP's game here, but ultimately to try and put some pressure on Brussels. There's another theory doing the rounds, though, that in a way, because the DUP has its reputation, once the most popular party, single party in Northern Ireland, is now, its polling rating is on the skids. We have elections coming up in May. It needs to do something to try and get ahead of the process of the negotiation. And this is in a way, to try and reassert its local appeal with its former electorate. Whether it's successful in doing that or not it really depends on whether there are substantial mediations coming forward. They're not going to stop a border in the Irish Sea. What they might be able to do is to mitigate the checks and balances on that border, such that most ordinary consumers don't feel the negative effects of it.
Yeah, I mean, now that he unilaterally called off all the checks and has brought the government down, does that mean the checks are going to stay out of play?
No, because the civil servants cannot make any decisions. That's something that's gone to the High Court during the previous collapse of Stormont. The last ministerial decision that made before leaving office is the only one they're allowed to follow. So when Stormont collapses, they will have to follow the previous minister's direction, unless and until Westminster has the nerve, if you like, to collapse the whole thing completely and take all of those powers back into Westminster, something that previous Westminster governments have been very reluctant to do, because getting to even to this fragile stage of devolved independence has taken a huge amount of political capital, and not just from one or two prime ministers, but all prime ministers really since John Major.
Yeah, Mick, what a mess we're left with. Mick Fealty there, who's the editor of Slugger O'Toole. And make no mistake, I'm fairly certain the EU knew exactly what they were doing when they wargamed over that Irish border. Remember, I was in that Parliament and party to those negotiations, and they weren't being done in good faith. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, the future of London's top cop is in doubt after a report found some of her officers guilty of disgraceful behaviour, and it's pretty horrifying. Now it's time for a check on the news headlines.
It's 2:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The energy regulator Ofgem has announced a 54% rise in the price cap. Those on default tariffs paying by direct debit will see their bills go up by nearly £700, and prepayment customers face annual charges of more than £2,000. The change will be introduced from April the 1st, affecting around 22 million customers. Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he'll give households in council tax bands A to D an extra £350 to ease the burden. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 0.5% and signalled more hikes are on the way as it tries to curb inflation. It marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase since June 2004. Meanwhile, energy giant Shell has managed to capitalise on the soaring gas and oil prices. The company recorded a pre-tax profit of £12 billion in the last 3 months of 2021. That's up from almost £900 million in the previous quarter. GB News understands Northern Ireland's First Minister Paul Givan is planning to resign today. It comes amid increasing tensions over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Officials were ordered to stop agri-food checks. That's potentially a breach of international law. Hauliers are calling for clarity as lorries are still being received, but it's not clear whether inspections are going ahead. US special forces say the leader of ISIS has been killed in northwest Syria. President Joe Biden announced that Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi has now been removed from the battlefield and there were no US casualties. Al-Qurashi reportedly detonated a bomb as US forces approached during an overnight raid, killing himself and at least 13 others, including women and children. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll have a full update at the top of the hour. After the break, it's back to Alex and We Need to Talk About.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
They're paid for by the public to protect us and given privileges and powers to do so. So it's pretty important we can trust the police to have a moral compass and a strong sense of discipline and duty. If George Floyd was the moment America sensed a crisis with their cops, perhaps Sarah Everard was ours. Shocking revelations that the Met police officers shared jokes in WhatsApp groups about rape, about killing black children, about gays and paedophilia is beyond locker room humour, with Home Secretary Priti Patel dragging Police Chief Cressida Dick in to explain what she described as too many instances of the most appalling behaviour. Scotland Yard, once the pride of a nation, now a force fighting to defend its reputation. But is this solely a police problem, or a symptom of a coarsening society increasingly abandoning the old-fashioned values of decency and respect that once held us together? Well, let's talk to former Chief Superintendent of the Met, Parm Sandhu. Parm, what do you think about this? I mean, some of the reports we've heard about the nature of those conversations happening in WhatsApp groups, and then we find out about various police officers who have actually committed crimes and somehow managed to stay in position. It doesn't paint a good picture, does it? Should Cressida Dick resign?
Alex, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I think there is a huge problem here because you've mentioned a couple of the incidents from the last year or so, but Sarah Everard was one of those instances. There was also the WhatsApp messages in relation to Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman. That's the two sisters that were murdered in a park. And then images of their bodies were shared by a group of people, group of police officers, serving police officers, on a WhatsApp group. So we seem to have incident after incident. And when I read the report yesterday, I wasn't surprised. I was really saddened. I was really upset, but I wasn't surprised because this seems to have become more and more frequent and it seems to be getting away. You know, people aren't being held to account for it. And of those 14 officers, only 2 were sacked, just 2. 2 resigned before the investigation was complete. And one of them actually came back and has got a job as a police staff member. Now, that's not a good message to send out to the public that the Met Police are supposed to be serving.
Yeah, one thing that I don't understand, and back in the day, there was this sort of image of the British gentleman copper, you know, the guy who a pregnant lady could ask to relieve herself in his hat. I know that's just folklore, but there was always this idea that the Bobby on the beat was a respected member of the community and hardly someone who's going to be mocking the victims of violent crime and making misogynist jokes. So what has happened? Is this a problem specific to the police, or do you think this is a symptom of a wider problem we have in society?
Personally, I think it's a system, a problem within policing, because we're not acknowledging that there are issues within policing that need to be addressed. And if you don't admit there's a problem, you can't then deal with it, because the report yesterday talks about lack of supervision, about stress. But, you know, going back, I did 30 years in policing, and in my service 10 years, 20 years ago, this was just not heard of. With the incoming WhatsApp social media increase, people are allowed to share these deviances. That's the only way I can describe it, the deviances, because I have to say that the majority of police officers are there for the right reasons and they want to do a good job. They may not let you use their hat as a receptacle, but they are there for the right reasons.
I mean, what sort of things did you witness? Because you said that when you first started out in the police, these sort of things just didn't happen, but over time they increasingly began to take place. What sort of things?
Well, when I first started, I went out on patrol with a colleague and I was called the P word and my colleague stuck up for me and I was really happy. I was really great. I thought, wow, they're really going to take me in as part of the team. And then my colleague then went on and said, only we're allowed to call her that. Things changed. That was when I first started, but things did change after the Macpherson report, and that was after the tragic murder of Stephen Lawrence. But things did change, and for about 10 years, it was really good, and people were being dealt with, and attitudes and culture was changing. And then diversity became a dirty word and it became unfashionable. And the police service went backwards, and that sort of behaviour started to bubble up again and hasn't been addressed. And now we see it in its worst form.
So do you think that it's time that Cressida Dick was gotten rid of and someone brought in who would perhaps reign with more of an iron fist?
The issue I have with Cressida going is the fact that Priti Patel and the Mayor of London gave her an extension last year that she said, she promised us as members of the public that she would make a difference and that she would change things. And I feel that if we held, as members of the public, if we held her to account and asked her, what have you done in the last year? What have you done to make a difference and to improve that culture? That would be more beneficial, because if she's not there, somebody else will come in. How do we hold anyone accountable for what's happened in the last year, 2 years? And even this report that came out yesterday, it's based on an inquiry that started in 2018. Surely the Met Police didn't wait until yesterday to take action on this report. Surely they started those actions in 2018. And I want to know what those actions were. I want to know what the activity was. So I feel it's better to hold her to account and actually have her answer those questions for us, the members of the public, and also other colleagues across the country.
Palm, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight into this. Some pretty horrific reports coming out of Metropolitan Police about the sort of behaviour that was taking place. That's Palm Sandhu, who's a former chief superintendent. Well, Dawn, I wanted to speak to you about this because, I mean, my feeling is, yes, it's horrific. This behaviour should not be happening with people who we give powers and privileges to enforce the law of the land. And yet, I don't think it's specifically just the police. I think there's something going wrong in society at large.
I think society is getting more misogynistic as a whole, to be honest with you. I think obviously social media has a lot to answer for, but you know, linked in with that, you've got the whole cancellation of women as well. I mean, we can't even claim to be women now. And the catalogue of errors that have happened under Cressida's reign, they all involve women. I mean, Sarah Everard is one we all remember, but the two girls that were murdered, the two sisters, I mean, Bieber Henry and her sister Nicole Smallman, those images were shared by service.
Posing next to their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got Yasmin Chakafi, the woman that was murdered in Maida Vale by her ex. She was going to the police with stalking issues for months, if not years, and nothing was done, Alex. So it's women that are bearing the brunt of this. But I mean, I disagree with Palm on one issue here, and it's like, you know, if you go back to sort of the Yorkshire Ripper victims, you know, they were, you know, the women that weren't sex workers were described as decent women. So this attitude of misogyny and sexism in the police has been there for a long time. And I think Cressida, to be honest with you, has to go. And I don't like for calling for anyone to lose their job, because I think it's a quick knee-jerk reaction. But there's just too much going on now, and I don't see any changes happening anytime soon. Meanwhile, we've got the softly policing of the BLM protests. Meanwhile, a group of grieving women on Clapham Common over the Sarah Everard murder were treated really, really violently in some cases. I mean, some of those women say that they felt like they'd been assaulted by the police. So something has to give, someone has to go. And what I don't want is for Cressida Dick to be able to stand down, to retire before she faces proper justice on a full pension. That happens a lot.
Have you had any sort of dealings with the police for any reason of late where you kind of feel like you weren't listened to?
Not that I can discuss on air, obviously. No, I haven't. Thankfully, I really haven't. But you do hear some absolute horror stories. I mean, and it's not just male police officers as well. There was a very recent case of the I think it's gone to the court, hasn't it? Where she was
the university professor.
That's right, university professor who was arrested for giving a card out to a young lad who was being arrested.
Then strip search, mopped for body hair.
She actually said, like, she felt she'd been sexually assaulted. Yeah. And there were women police officers who were holding her down, who were cutting her clothing off, and she hadn't actually really done anything wrong. So there is a whole issue here that it's like, and it's not just one. But you know, the real issue with this, Alex, is the latest example at Charing Cross Police Station. Out of the 14 police officers involved in that, 9 are still serving.
Yeah. No, I agree. It doesn't seem like anyone's taking control of this situation. We do, of course, have a statement from the Met's Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Baz Javid. He has said, "We recognise that there is a need for real change in the Met, and we are committed to creating an environment that is even more intolerant to those who do not uphold the high values and standards expected of us." Well, we expect them to hold those high standards and values too. Now, imagine having an invasive urgent surgery that leaves you writhing in pain, unable to relieve yourself properly, with chronic years of side effects, or further brutal surgeries just to clear up the damage. That's been the experience of thousands of mesh-injured men and women, with hundreds now fighting a legal battle for compensation following procedures using the material that was banned from use for certain procedures in the UK in 2018 due to grave concerns over potential side effects. The gruesome toll of patients who underwent pelvic mesh surgeries is evident, as England has had to open up a network of specialist removal centres last year, as only a few surgeons are able to carry out the procedure. Well, a debate in Parliament today has been looking at recommendations to the government on what they should do for victims, with the tales of those suffering as a result of its use truly harrowing. I'm joined now by surgical mesh victim Paula Goss. Paula, can you tell us a little bit about your personal story?
Yes, so I had issues after I had a hysterectomy, and with going to the toilet. So I ended up with a pexy mesh inserted. I didn't know that, and I didn't only have that mesh, sadly. So my issues started in 2014 when it was implanted, and then continued on after that until I had to eventually get removal, which I couldn't get on the NHS and had to go private to get my removal.
NHS essentially, I mean, perhaps this was before the time when people realised that the application of mesh, particularly in pelvic surgeries, could come with particularly terrible side effects. But the NHS weren't then willing to undo that.
No, I mean, sadly, the problem you've got is with all mesh types, to be honest, but especially with the bowel, it's such a difficult surgery to remove this mesh because it adheres to all your organs. Most people who go through the removal end up losing their bowels, their bladders, and other parts of their internal organs, and it can just cause devastating effects. So there's very, very few that can remove our meshes. But even with the other meshes, the vaginal meshes, there's stories where they get part removals and then end up with issues. Some who go in with a surgeon who says they can try. It's difficult. They know how to put it in, are not experienced in taking it out, and I don't think there many are.
I mean, the government are now being given recommendations of how they should compensate or look after people like you who've gone through what I can only imagine is a really horrific experience with this. And there are thousands of sufferers out there. What are you hoping might come out of that?
Well, I'd firstly like to thank Alex Shelbrooke for bringing the debate to Westminster and all the members that are speaking on there. My MP as well, Luke Hall, who's been instrumental in helping me through this process. The government, I think they're very blinkered in their view with regards to redress. I think they just think that we're a bunch of people that are just going after a bit of money. It's not that case. An apology, which we had last year, that's fine. But what does that apology do for your suffering? They've suffered for years and years, these people, and they're going to continue to suffer for years and years, even when the mesh is taken out. I've had mine taken out. I still have issues, different issues, but you're swapping one set of complications for another. And this is the scandal in it all, really. But I just hope that the government will finally listen, which they did eventually, with other procedures. But this is for all, all mesh type. It's got to be for all mesh type because they can all cause these complications. They're all either polypropylene or bio meshes, so they can all have the effect on people to cause these complications eventually. Some people, they may not. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, Paula, thank you so much for coming on, bravely sharing your story. And I have no doubt that, I mean, you had to give up work as a result of this, and I have no doubt that you are due some form of compensation. So Paula Goss there, who is herself a victim of surgical mesh gone wrong. Don, what do you think about this story? I mean, I get the impression with this, the government's thinking, well, it's too few people in number to really have to do anything about it.
I think you're right. And again, Paula's incredibly brave for talking out about this, because obviously in Paula's case, it's the pelvic mesh, and it's an incredibly intimate thing to happen to a woman, and to talk about that publicly is very brave. So fair play to her and the other victims that have come out and talking about it. And I think, you know, it's not a small number, because no matter how small the number, Alex, these people are really suffering. I mean, I wasn't overly aware of what the consequences were, but listening to Paula talk there about it actually sticking to the internal organs and having to have your bowel removed and things like that, is just absolutely horrific. And yet, in the great scheme of things, you know, especially in times of COVID, it's a small number of people. But what they're going through is incredibly upsetting, incredibly painful. And the government do need to listen. And they just don't seem to. As Paula said, they apologised. You know, the report came out in July 2020, and it was sort of like, you know, recommendations were made. And the government did apologise. But Alex, everyone's apologising for everything at the moment, and still nothing gets done. People like Paula are still suffering, still talking about it to this day. And what are we doing for these victims? We're not looking after them. And we really should be. It's so important. And again, I think there is an issue here with it being, in the pelvic case, mainly women.
Yeah, it actually reminds me a bit of the PIP implant scandal, this one. So let's see how it's going to unfold. You've been emailing us your views today in droves about the cost of living crisis. Ian says, so between Band A and D on council tax, you'll get a rebate of 150 quid. However, our council tax is going up by 4.9%. I bet that's more than 150 quid, isn't it? This is disgraceful. Yeah, papering over cracks, eh? Jones says it's absolutely disgusting. And in my opinion, companies that profit should have the face to tell us how much they profit, and they should be taxed more. I'm a Conservative, but I'm with Labour on this one. You know, I'm kind of with you. I'm a big bit for that windfall tax on their windfall profits. Adam says, my electric bill has more than tripled this year. I know it's winter, but this is crazy. Oh, it's going to get crazier, believe me, especially if Russia invades Ukraine and then we're COP. Don't think we're out of the woods yet. Sharon says, we're in Band E simply because of the road we are on. We already pay $170 per month on a dual fuel tariff. Goodness knows how that's going to go up. We cannot afford all these increases coming at us right, left and centre. Ruth says, I'm a pensioner on a low income and I live in a modest house, but it happens to fall in Band E. That's the thing, the bands are quite arbitrary, aren't they? If the Chancellor thinks that it's a posh house and that I'm wealthy, he needs to come into the real world. Well, Dawn, let's go back to this top story of the day. We are about to face the biggest cost of living crisis. I don't think people have really accounted for the fact that with energy bills going up, this, of course, affects manufacturing and the cost of everything.
Absolutely, the cost of everything. And, you know, I keep coming back to, you know, what you've just said. You know, North Sea oil companies are set to report near record cash flows of £14.9 billion. Right, OK. Maybe the windfall tax is the way forward. I don't think taxing us through the roof and this, you know, taking taxpayers' money off us to give it back in another area. And we're not all going to benefit from this council tax thing. It's ridiculous. It's fiddling around the edges. It's papering over
the government did have an option, didn't they? Because post-Brexit, we'd be allowed to strip VAT off energy bills. Why have they not done that?
Well, a good question. I mean, if Boris is listening, maybe he'd like to let us know, because he was boasting about it. Oh, I can do whatever I want with the VAT. I don't have to do that anymore. Why hasn't he done it? I mean, he was boasting about it just last year, and we've still got 5% on every energy bill for VAT. And then, as we discussed earlier, there's the green levies. 25% of my own personal fuel bill, because I'm on a single tariff, single fuel thing. And you know, but most people will be 15% at least. That's a lot of money on sort of like an energy bill that's got £2,000 a year, and that's for a small average home.
Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today. That's all we've got time for. Back again, same place, same time tomorrow on GB News. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Darren McCaffrey. First of all, it's time for the weather forecast. And for me, bye-bye.
Hello again. A mild one again today, but things are changing. Tomorrow's going to be an awful lot colder, and that colder weather will arrive After a wet and windy spell tonight, it's all coming from a cold front, which is approaching at the moment and will later today bring some heavy rain to the Western Isles and the Highlands of Scotland. But for most of us, it's another dry day. There's a lot of cloud around, but we are seeing some breaks in the clouds, so a bit of sunshine likely, parts of East Wales, the Midlands, North East England, Eastern Scotland seeing some breaks in the cloud, and even further south we may at times see a little blue sky. But generally cloudy, dry and mild with a bit of a breeze blowing. Temperatures double digits, maybe 12, 13 degrees where we see some sunshine. But there's that rain coming into the far northwest later on. Could be quite heavy for a time, and it will start to turn to snow initially over the mountains. It pushes southwards, that rain band across into northern England, parts of Wales overnight. So an hour or two of rain, and for a short spell at least, that rain could be pretty heavy again, falling as snow